Alright, here is a new video and a new video type. Trying something different, which hopefully I'll be able to do quite a bit of. But just to get it out of the way, background gameplay has zero correlation to what I'm doing. It's just I've gotten to play Warframe for a little while, or excuse me, wow, Soulframe for a little while, and I felt like it'd be fun. So yeah, today I was going to talk about D&D and its stat mascots, which you'll be able to tell from the title of the video if you take a look at it. But for those who don't know, we got 6 stats of D&D, and I feel like some of them have quite a bigger class identity than the other. And first off, we got Charisma. First, because it's Wizard of the Coast's favorite child, and well, the other reason because it's everyone's most classes' main stat. And their strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and the neglected child, of which we'll get into, Constitution. And on that, for the mascots, Charisma claims dual mascotship with Bard and Warlock. Because, I mean, when you think of Charisma, you think of, oh, there's someone, talking, face of the party, that kind of thing. And those are usually your Bard or your Warlock, because all they need is Charisma to function. You give them Charisma, and just like all the rest of these that I'm going to be talking about, you give them Charisma, they work at 90% efficiency without any other stat. And with the Bard, it's casting modifier at a higher levels. You're basically almost only going to be casting unless you're speccing into decks for, bow builds or rapier, that part of the class fantasy. But for what makes a bard, charisma is really all that you need. Be the face. Same with the warlock, and actually I would argue even more so, with charisma being their casting modifier, and with Eldritch Blast being 80% of their kit. It's not hard to believe that 90% of their kit at least is just charisma. But with those two, which I think are almost unarguable, it's pretty obvious that that's all it is, which is a lot easier for caster classes. But I say strength, its mascot is the fighter. Because when you think of fighter, you don't immediately think, oh, the two-handed dual-wielding type or the dex fighter and all that kind of stuff. When you think of fighter, the first thought that really pops into your head, or at least for me, is that guy holding a greatsword. The knight holding a greatsword, 2 hands, doing combat as his only great proficiency and fighting like that. And that's a strength build. So I think he's really the mascot for just pure strength. We'll get into what everyone I think also would think is the strength mascot in a second. But I think dexterity is the rogue. You give a rogue dexterity, he's not wanting for anything else. And it's just all of his checks, all of his attacks, abilities, it's all dexterity. He's a very mono stat class. Don't get me wrong, subclasses change everything. When you think of the Arcane Trickster, oh, so an inst is important. Well, you can do the same thing with the Fighter, the Eldritch Knight. And so subclasses are not what I'm getting into right now. But yeah, so Dex, it's easy poster boy, rogue. But intelligence has, 1 or 2. The 2 is kind of a hinge depending kind of thing. And that would be the obvious wizard. Almost even more so than the rogue, the wizard. You give it int, it's done. If they have an option to balance things out or just to shove more intelligence into themselves, they're going to shove more intelligence. But the second one for this mascot, if you're of the mind to allow, because I still believe it's not an official class, is Artificer. And that one's kind of obvious. It also doesn't really require anything else, and even more so for the not needing con or dex as much, as it will have a lot heavier armor than the wizard, and so it eliminates the need if you want to look at it that way. And so Next up, I was going to say Wisdom. It's also a dual citizenship stat with Cleric and Druid. It's You look at all of their other stats; they are far, far below just pumping the Wisdom stat. Cleric is definitely more of an all-arounder, just because you want your heal bot or just debuff bot, buff bot to have HP, Constitution, everything else. But they're also one of the ones that can wear a heavier armor, so Dex and Con aren't as big of a need, I guess. But yeah. And then Druid, for what you think of as the main class, you're going to be transforming. Your stats, honestly, is probably the least stat-reliant character, as you just transform. And then after those two, the classes get a little bit more greedy as they kind of mascot for two stats together, because it's yes, they'll all have a main stat that you'll want to pump higher than the rest, but you don't ever really leave the second stat far behind. And for the first ones of those, I'd say the two that go for the same stat, or excuse me, the same two stats, is for Dex and Wisdom. We got the Monk and the Ranger. In my little bullet points for this, I have the Chad Monk and the Chud Ranger, because we all know which of those are favorites and which of those get neglected by companies. And as you can see from, if you are looking at the background of this, I'm using a bow. I sincerely wish Ranger became a class. Actually, I can stop that statement right there. I really wish Ranger became a class. That'd be really cool. But to be also fair, as I think I like Monk more than Ranger. It's just thematically, I'm gonna run up, stroll up, and just punch God in the face, punch a dragon in the face. Decide I wanted to just suplex him into the ground. I think that's pretty fun. And then with Ranger, Dex, Wisdom, and we got the obvious bits. Dex for bows and dual wielding, as I more think of them as a dual wielding class when you start thinking about it. You got the classic Drizzt Duorden. I'm probably butchering his name, but the dual swords, the panther, the bow. You know, it's Dex and Wisdom. Wisdom as a casting modifier, Dex for their weapons. It's a pretty easy sell that it's kind of the mascot for that kind of stat build. And then Monk, more so, gets more armor with more Wisdom and Dex. Dex is what you would predominantly think. But even if predominantly everyone ran Strength Monk in Baldur's Gate 3, which is the big D&D game, I did as well. But that's just because drunken fighting... No. It's not called drunken fighting. It's something else. Tavern brawling? Whatever. It gave you strength on hit and basically broke a monk in that game. And that's the only reason why people would maybe, I think strength. Otherwise, Dex is definitely the way to go. And then next up, we have our resident Nepo baby in the Sorcerer. And I think it's kind of obvious because he's also a contender for being a solo mascot, is Charisma and Constitution. The only reason to say he's in competition to be a solo mascot is that I heard sentiments online, and I kind of agree with it, that I think it'd be really cool if Sorcerer was Constitution based, where its casting modifier and everything was Constitution. Because, you know, it's just harnessing the bloodline. All you need is really the bloodline, and then you're magical. It's not like you need the charisma to convince your bloodline to let you use it, which, I mean, I guess could be the flavor. But, yeah, I think Constitution would be a really cool cast modifier for it, but that's not what it is, and so now you need charisma to be able to cast it, and Constitution kind of for the bloodline stuff. I think those kind of usually go pretty hand in hand, especially because they're one of the better casters for holding like concentration and such, because I believe they have advantage on Constitution rolls. And then we got the good old Holy Roller, which, if you can't tell, is the Paladin, constituting strength and charisma. Again, strength just because you think of sword and board or big hammer. WoW's done a pretty good number on the image of what a paladin is in the minds of the fantasy masses. A big old light colored plate armor with a dude with a giant hammer, or a sword and a shield, or a sword and or a shield and a hammer, that kind of stuff. So I'd say strength for his weapons, his plate mail, that kind of warrior, and his charisma is his casting modifier. So he's kind of a dual mascot as well. And then last but not least, claiming the unique pie of strength and constitution, a barbarian. The man literally uses the Constitution in his armor class. It's an easy sell right there. And just, you think it, the strength, obvious, he's a big contender for doing strength as its mascot, just because he really just does embody it. But Constitution is something that I don't think any barbarian would ever neglect. And since it's such a big tanking class, going totem, bear, and psychic being the only weakness, you're tanking a lot more than you're just being a pure damage dealer, where with like a fighter is, besides if you get a shield. And so strength and constitution, barbarian mascot all the way. Now, whether you agree or disagree with any of my justifications, you may be wondering where the solo mascot for Constitution is. Every other stat has one class that really just does fully embrace it. Like I said, the sorcerer could be that. I don't think it ever will be, and I think there's a better class for that could be made. This Constitution deserves some love. Everybody loves being able to live, that kind of thing. Constitution really helps with that. So Con doesn't deserve to be, left out in the cold. No dedicated mascot or friend. So I say we're going to make one. Not right now, but in this video series, where I'm going to be making the missing links of D&D. All the combinations that just don't get any love, I'm going to make them. I'm going to give them their love. And basically that's what I'm going to try and do on this channel, is theory crafting. And I think I'm going to call it D&D's Missing Links. So usually, probably by the time anyone ever sees any of this, I'll have a playlist going, and I'll be trying to fill up all the different combos that D&D is missing on. From just a straight up Constitution to things like Constitution Wisdom and Constitution Intelligence, just to name a few. And that'll be D&D's Missing Links. Thank you very much for watching. If you stayed around, you'll probably be one of the very first to see my journey going into YouTube. I'd love to be able to fill up this section with supporters and whatnot, or just people who hung out. But that'll come in the future. And that's it. Thank you for watching.